Welcome to the Orchid Advisors Compliance Training Series, NICS Background Check. The National Instant Criminal Background Check System, NICS, is used to perform background checks on non-licensees prior to the transfer of a firearm. Mandated by the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act of 1993, also known as the Brady Law, and launched by the FBI in November 1998, NICS is used by federal firearms licensees, FFLs, to instantly determine whether a prospective buyer is eligible to buy firearms. The ATF has designated the following individuals as being ineligible from possessing a firearm: persons who are or have been under indictment for a felony, where punishment could have been imprisonment for a term of more than 1 year, a fugitive from justice, an unlawful drug user or drug addict, adjudicated mentally defective or involuntarily committed to a mental institution, dishonorably discharged from the military, subject to a restraining order involving their child, an intimate partner, or child of such partner, for example, domestic violence restraining order, convicted of a crime, renounced their U.S. citizenship, aliens illegally or unlawfully in the U.S. Dealers and retailers must be enrolled with the FBI before they can initiate NICS checks through the FBI's NICS Operations Center. NICS is located at the FBI's Criminal Justice Information Services Division in Clarksburg, West Virginia. The NICS Operations Center provides full service to FFLs in 30 states, 5 U.S. territories, and the District of Columbia. NICS is customarily available 17 hours a day, 7 days a week, including holidays, except for Christmas. However, not all NICS checks go through the FBI's NICS Operations Center. In many states, licensees initiate NICS checks through the State Point of Contact, POC. If the state is acting as a POC, it does not necessarily mean that all NICS checks go through the POC rather than the FBI. The process depends on the state. In some states, the POC conducts background checks for all firearms transactions. In other states, licensees must contact the POC for handgun transactions and the FBI for long gun transactions. In some POC states, NICS checks for pawn redemptions are handled by the FBI. How does a dealer or retailer know whether to contact the FBI or state POC in order to initiate an NICS check? Your local ATF office can advise you on the appropriate point of contact, or you can check the ATF webpage at atf.gov. The FBI does not charge a fee for conducting NICS checks. However, states that act as POCs for NICS checks may charge a fee consistent with state law. The dealer or retailer should contact NICS after the buyer has completed Section A of the ATF Firearm Transaction Record, Form 4473. The dealer or retailer will then request an NICS background check with the descriptive information provided on Form 4473. This requirement applies to sales from a licensee to a non-licensee, including over-the-counter sales, sales generated during a gun show, and pawned firearms returned to the individual from whom it was received. Certain exceptions apply and will be discussed later in this presentation. The dealer or retailer either contacts the NICS Operations Center via a toll-free telephone number or electronically on the Internet through the NICS eCheck system or through the state POC as appropriate. The background check is completed before ringing up the sale to confirm that the customer does not have a criminal record or isn't otherwise ineligible to make a purchase. The background check can be instantaneous but is dependent on the volume of transactions in queue. The FFL holder will receive the following responses. The licensee initially will get either a proceed or delayed response from NICS. If the licensee gets a proceed response, the firearm may be transferred if there is no additional state waiting period. If the licensee gets a delayed response, it indicates the transaction is in open status and that more research is required prior to an NICS proceed or denied response. If the licensee gets a delayed response and there is no additional response from the FBI or POC, the licensee may transfer the firearm after 3 business days have elapsed. Of course, the licensee must still comply with any waiting period requirements under state law. FFLs contacting the FBI directly will receive information from the FBI indicating when the 3 business days time period elapses on delayed transactions. If the licensee gets a denied response prior to the 3 business days elapsing, the firearm cannot be transferred. In addition, after conducting additional research, the FBI may provide the FFL with a canceled response. Transactions will be canceled if the FBI discovers that the NICS check was not initiated in accordance with ATF or FBI regulations. A licensee cannot transfer a firearm upon receipt of a canceled response. There are 3 pieces of information that must be entered on the Form 4473. Step 1 must be recording the date that NICS was initially contacted. Step 2 is the NICS response or transaction number. And Step 3 is the NICS response such as proceed, delayed, denied, or canceled. Transaction number. The FBI's NICS Operations Center will always provide a transaction number at the time of the initial inquiry. Some state POCs may not provide a transaction number for denied transactions. If a state POC does not provide a transaction number for a denied transaction, then the dealer or retailer should just record the response without a transaction number. Licensees should note, however, that a transaction number is required if a proceed response is issued and the firearm is being transferred within 3 business days of the initiation of an NICS check. Response and date. If the initial NICS response was delayed, dealers or retailers also must record the date when later proceed or denied response was received, or that no resolution was provided within 3 business days if they transfer the firearm after the 3 days. In addition, if a dealer or retailer receives a response from NICS after a firearm has been transferred, he or she must record this information. There are a few other stipulations unique to the NICS process. They include, but are not limited to: 1. The NICS transaction number is only good for 30 calendar days from the date the background check was initiated. Thus, if the sale or transfer is not completed within 30 calendar days, the dealer or retailer should initiate a new NICS background check. 2. If the NICS response is denied, the following circumstances apply. The dealer or retailer should inform the buyer that the NICS check indicates that the transfer of the firearm should not be made, but that it does not provide a reason for the denial. The dealer or retailer should provide the buyer with the NICS or state transaction number and an appeals brochure. The dealer or retailer must retain Form 4473 with the denied or canceled responses attached for a period of 5 years. 3. If a buyer places an order for a custom-made firearm, which will not be ready for at least 60 days, the licensee may want to wait until the firearm is ready for delivery, or in the case of a layaway purchase, until full payment can be made, to have the purchaser complete Section A of the Form 4473 and contact NICS for a background check. This is because if the purchaser completes Section A of the Form 4473 on the date the order is placed, and an NICS check is initiated on that day, the licensee will have to conduct a second NICS check prior to transferring the firearm, and the purchaser will have to complete Section C of the ATF Form 4473 at the time of delivery. 4. An NICS check may only cover one firearm transaction. However, an individual may purchase several firearms in one transaction. 5. If the state has its own instant check system and the state is not acting as a POC for NICS checks, the dealer or retailer may have to initiate 2 background checks by contacting 1. The FBI's NICS Operations Center, and 2. The state system. 6. If a state has a waiting period for transferring firearms, the dealer or retailer has to wait until expiration of the state waiting period, even if they received a proceed response from the NICS check. There are several instances where an NICS check is not required. These include, but are not limited to, the following. The transfer involves only an NFA firearm. However, more detailed requirements exist, such as the approval on an ATF Form 3, 4, 5, or 9. The buyer has a valid permit from the state where the transfer takes place. The buyer is certified by the ATF as exempt because compliance with the NICS check requirement is impracticable. The transfer involves a weapon that meets the Gun Control Act's definition of an antique firearm. The firearm is being transferred to another licensee, for example, FFL holder. The transaction transfers curio or relic firearms by licensed collectors. If selling firearms from a personal collection, provided the licensee has maintained the firearm as part of his personal collection for at least 1 year from the date the firearm was transferred from his business inventory into his personal collection, or otherwise acquired as a personal firearm, and the licensee complies with the record-keeping requirements in 27 CFR 478.125A. If the firearm is loaned or rented for use on the licensee's premises. However, if the firearm is loaned or rented for use off the premises, the licensee must complete an NICS background check. Transfer of a repaired or replacement firearm. Transfers of firearms to law enforcement officials for their official use when the transaction complies with the conditions set forth in the regulations at 27 CFR 478.134. In general, the purchaser must provide a certification on agency letterhead, signed by a person in authority within the agency, other than the officer purchasing the firearm, stating that the officer will use the firearm in official duties, and that the records check reveals that the purchasing officer has no convictions for misdemeanor crimes of domestic violence. However, the dealer or retailer must record the transaction in his or her permanent records and retain a copy of the certification letter. There are circumstances unique to pawnbrokers which you should be aware of. For example, the redemption of a pawned firearm is considered a transfer subject to an NICS check. If a buyer wishes to redeem their pawned firearm, but the NICS check results in a denied response, the pawnbroker cannot transfer the firearm. If an individual repeatedly pawns the same firearm, an NICS check is required each time the firearm is redeemed. A licensed pawnbroker may conduct NICS checks prior to accepting a firearm in pawn. This is optional. However, if the check results in a denied response, the licensee is required to notify local law enforcement officials within 48 hours after receipt of the denied response. If the pawnbroker has taken possession of the firearm, he or she may not return it to the individual who offered it for pawn. If a licensed pawnbroker conducts an NICS check prior to accepting a firearm in pawn and gets approved response from NICS, the law provides that another NICS check must be done at the time of redemption, regardless of how recently the pre-pawn NICS check was conducted. Even if the firearm is redeemed the same day, a separate NICS check must be conducted at the time of redemption. Thank you for watching this segment of our video training series. Viewers are encouraged to seek professional advice prior to assessment, implementation, or execution.